I was 38 the night the police came to my door and told me my wife was dead. Even now, when I replay the memory in my head, I can still hear the rain dripping from their uniforms, the smell of wet asphalt clinging to them as they stood on my porch. The taller officer's voice was low, rehearsed, heavy with false sympathy. "Ma'am, I'm afraid I have very difficult news. Your wife was in a fatal car accident an hour ago." For a moment, the world stopped. My lungs refused to move, my body forgot the act of breathing. I clutched the doorway, whispering no again and again, as if denial could rewind time. But then, like something out of a nightmare, I realized that my wife was upstairs in bed. I had kissed her forehead only an hour earlier when she complained of a migraine. She was wrapped in our blankets, breathing softly while I went downstairs to pay bills and clear the dishes. How could she be both dead and alive? I remember laughing then, the sound sharp and broken like glass underfoot. "That's impossible," I told them. "She's upstairs. She's sleeping. I'll show you." The officers exchanged a look, their eyes wary, their hands twitching toward the weapons at their sides. Still, they followed me up the stairs, their boots thudding on the wood like a countdown. When I pushed open the bedroom door, my relief was immediate and overwhelming. There she was, my wife, her familiar blonde hair spilling across the pillow. Her body curled in the position she always took when she wanted to shut the world out. "See?" I cried, half laughing, half sobbing. "She's right here. She's fine." But she didn't move, she didn't stir. The officer stepped forward cautiously, his voice tight. "Ma'am, step back from the bed." Confusion swirled in me, then dread. He touched her shoulder, and what should have been warm flesh gave under his fingers with a stiffness that did not belong to the living. His hand hovered at her neck, searching for a pulse that did not exist. When he turned to me, his face was pale, his jaw clenched. "This isn't your wife. This is something else." And then I saw it. The skin was too waxy, the hair a wig sewn into scalp that wasn't human. My wife, the woman I had loved and trusted for 16 years, was not lying in that bed. What lay before me was a mannequin, a grotesque, perfect imitation dressed in her clothes, her jewelry, her perfume. My knees buckled. I collapsed against the wall, staring at the thing that had replaced her. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might tear my chest apart. Where was she who had done this? The officers demanded answers I didn't have. They asked where my wife was, why her car had been found wrecked on the highway, why her body had supposedly been pulled from the crash. Their words blurred together, a storm of accusations and disbelief. I kept repeating the only truth I knew: she was here. She was here an hour ago. She was sleeping right there. But even as the words left my mouth, doubt poisoned me. Was I losing my mind? Had I been so blinded by routine, by trust, by love, or maybe by denial that I had missed the signs? Because here's the truth. I hadn't admitted to anyone, not even myself, my marriage had been breaking for years. We lived in the same house, but our love had become a performance, each of us playing roles for the sake of appearances. She smiled at parties, touched my hand in public, called me darling when others could hear. But in private, her eyes were cold, her phone hidden, her excuses multiplying like shadows. I had suspected. God help me, I had suspected. The late nights, the whispered calls she took in the bathroom, the way she flinched when I touched her as if my hands were knives instead of the same hands she had once kissed with devotion. And then there was Wesley, my husband's business partner, charming, always too close, always lingering near her in ways that set my teeth on edge. Now standing in that bedroom with a mannequin in my wife's place, everything I had ignored came crashing down like an avalanche. My wife had not simply betrayed me. She had planned something so elaborate, so cruel, that even death itself had become a weapon in her hands. The officers radioed for backup, their voices tense, their eyes never leaving me as if I might explode at any second, but I barely heard them. All I could see was the empty bed where my wife should have been, and the grotesque doll that mocked the life we once shared. Grief, rage, disbelief, they all tangled inside me until I couldn't tell one from the other. I had thought betrayal was a wound. I hadn't known it could be a labyrinth, each turn darker than the last, each step pulling me further from the truth. And at the heart of it, one question screamed louder than all the rest. If the woman I loved was not in that bed, then where was she and what had she done to me? The hours after that discovery blurred together like a fever dream. Neighbors gathered outside when squad cars arrived, their silhouettes glowing in the flashing red and blue lights. I remember their faces pressed against windows, their whispers curling like smoke in the damp night air. To them, I was the grieving wife, the shocked widow, the woman whose world had just shattered. But inside, I wasn't just shattered, I was hollowed out, gutted by something far more sinister than loss. They searched the house, every closet, every corner, every inch of the basement, and yet they found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no blood, no struggle. Just that mannequin, a grotesque stand-in with a face frozen in silence lying where my wife should have been. The officers tried to guide me downstairs, asked me questions I barely registered. All I could hear was the pounding in my head, the echo of their first words, "She died an hour ago." But if she was dead, who had been sleeping in my bed? I couldn't stop replaying the last time I saw her alive, or what I thought was alive. She'd been distant all week, her eyes flicking toward her phone with attention I pretended not to notice. That evening, she had touched her temples, sighing about a headache, and told me she needed rest. I kissed her forehead, but her skin had felt cooler than usual. I told myself it was exhaustion. Now I wondered if it had been something else entirely, detachment deception, maybe even the residue of a plan she'd been hiding for months. The investigators returned with grim news. Her car had been found mangled against a tree off Highway 18. The body inside, though, charred and unrecognizable, carried her identification, her jewelry, even dental matches that seemed to confirm it was her. Yet here we were staring at a mannequin in her place. She was both dead and alive, both victim and perpetrator, and I was trapped in the middle of a nightmare no one could explain. By morning, whispers became headlines. "Business tycoon's wife dies in fiery crash," read the first report. But the police had already begun to question the inconsistencies. Neighbors said they'd seen her around the house that same evening. An officer leaked the bizarre discovery of the mannequin. And suddenly reporters weren't writing about a grieving widow. They were writing about a mystery woman, a wife who had died twice in one night. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house became suspect. Every creak of the floorboards felt like an accusation. And the memories clawed their way back, her late-night calls, the scent of cologne that wasn't mine, the way her eyes softened when Wesley, my husband's partner, entered the room. My gut twisted with recognition I had long buried. She hadn't just been drifting away. She had been plotting something vast and terrible right under my nose. Then came the folder. My brother Gerald brought it 3 days later, a heavy manila envelope he dropped on my kitchen table with the weight of a gavel. He had been suspicious long before I allowed myself to be. As a private investigator, he saw patterns I refused to acknowledge. "You're not going to like this," he warned, his voice brittle. Inside were photographs. My wife, my Jenny, wrapped in Wesley's arms outside a hotel, slipping into his car with a grin she hadn't worn for me in years. Entering an apartment, I had never seen her hand on his chest, like he was the home she had always wanted. 8 months. 8 months of betrayal, documented in timestamps that cut me open like knives. But it didn't end there. Gerald had dug deeper. He spoke of offshore accounts, false documents, whispers of new identities. She had been copying files from my office insurance policies, contracts, records of accounts worth millions. Wesley had been liquidating assets slowly, carefully, as if preparing to vanish. And then Gerald said the words that made my blood freeze. "They're planning for her to disappear, to fake her death." The accident wasn't just an accident, it was the beginning of an escape. My hands trembled as I sifted through the evidence. Each photo, each record, each detail confirmed what my heart had suspected, but my mind had denied. My wife hadn't been taken from me. She had taken herself, stolen herself away in a scheme that would leave me with nothing. Not love, not money, not even dignity. She had wanted me ruined. She had wanted me grieving, broken, stripped of everything, while she thrived in some sunlit corner of the world with the man I had once called a friend. But she had underestimated me. They both had. For years, I had built my life on resilience, on the promise that no one would ever abandon me again, the way my father once had. Betrayal was not new to me. But this was war. And if my wife thought she could kill herself on paper and rise anew in another life, then she had forgotten who I was. Because I would not just survive this, I would destroy it, piece by piece, lie by lie, until the empire they dreamed of building from my ashes turned to dust in their hands. The rage didn't come all at once. It seeped in slowly, like a tide that refused to retreat. For nights I sat in the dim glow of my study, the photographs spread before me like a crime scene, each image another knife twisting in my chest. Jenny's smile in those pictures was what cut the deepest. It wasn't the soft, unguarded smile she used to give me. It was sharper, secretive, lit by the thrill of betrayal. I would stare until the paper blurred with tears, then wipe them away with shaking hands. Crying didn't suit me anymore. Not after what she had done. I replayed everything, the distant tone in her voice when she asked about dinner, the way she checked her phone 3 times at the table, the purse she carried into the bathroom like a lifeline. The evidence had been there all along, but I had chosen blindness, perhaps out of love, perhaps out of fear. Now the scales had fallen, and all that was left was clarity. And clarity is a dangerous thing. I hired specialists, people who lived in shadows, who knew how to uncover secrets without leaving footprints. Hidden cameras bloomed in every corner of the house. My wife's phone became an open book, her calls and messages siphoned to me in real time. I followed her digitally step for step as she wove the threads of her deceit with Wesley. What unfolded was worse than I could have imagined. They weren't just having an affair, they were architects of my ruin. The plan was horrifying in its simplicity. Jenny would fake her death in a car accident. Wesley, cloaked in sympathy, would console me, shield me while quietly transferring business assets offshore. My grief would make me vulnerable, blind, too broken to see the theft until it was too late. By the time I realized they would be gone, names changed lives, reinvented, rich beyond measure. They had even roped in Ivan, my accountant of 6 years, a man I had trusted like family. He was helping them bury the money, converting everything into cryptocurrency, untraceable and silent. I should have felt despair. Instead, I felt something colder, sharper, a resolve forged in betrayal. They thought they knew me. They thought the years of wealth and comfort had softened me, made me complacent. But they had forgotten the boy I once was, the boy who had sworn never to be abandoned again, never to be made a fool. They had forgotten that my empire wasn't built on luck. It was built on strategy, on precision, on an iron will that bent the world to my design. So I began to weave a plan of my own, not just to stop them, but to end them. I reached out to people they didn't know I had. A former military police officer named Melissa, with a face too innocent for the danger she could summon. I offered her $50,000 for a day's work. All she had to do was convincingly play dead. She raised an eyebrow, skeptical at first, but I laid out enough of the scheme for her to understand. She agreed. Then came Tommy, the fixer they had trusted to orchestrate Jenny's disappearance. I intercepted him before Wesley's money could bind his loyalty. I doubled the offer. Now Tommy worked for me, and everything they believed was set in motion was in fact a puppet show I controlled. The irony was exquisite. Jenny believed she was staging her own death, but in truth, she was walking straight into my hands. The house became my stage. I altered the security system so I alone could dictate what the cameras saw and recorded. I had a room built in the basement, soundproof and secure, comfortable enough for a long stay, but impossible to escape. If she wanted to vanish from the world, I would grant her wish, but not on her terms. When the day arrived, rain smeared across the city like ash. Jenny kissed me goodbye that morning, with lips colder than stone. "I'll see you tonight," she said, her last lie. By 4 o'clock, Tommy called. "It's done. The car's wrecked on Highway 18. Don't worry, she never touched the wheel." Jenny was unconscious in the back of his van, believing she was moments from freedom. Instead, she was being delivered into the cell I had built for her. Meanwhile, Melissa played her part beautifully, lying in the twisted wreckage of Jenny's car. Her face obscured her body, perfectly positioned for the police to find. The medical examiner, a man who owed me more than one favor, would confirm what needed confirming. And me, I prepared dinner, set the table, and practiced my face in the mirror. the expression of a man about to be shattered by loss. When the knock came at the door, I was ready. The officers' voices were solemn, their words rehearsed. Your wife was in a fatal car accident an hour ago. I let my knees tremble, let my voice crack. No, that's impossible. She's upstairs. She was sleeping. I led them up every step, a performance, every breath perfectly timed. And when they found the mannequin in our bed, I gasped with practiced horror, my face a mask of grief and confusion. They thought they had uncovered the mystery. They had no idea the real game had only just begun. The police drew their guns when they saw the mannequin. To them, it was the revelation of a nightmare, a grieving husband, a fake corpse, and a wife whose whereabouts were suddenly unexplainable. To me, it was Act 1 of a play I had been writing in silence for weeks. I clutched the doorframe, my voice rising with convincing panic. She was here. She was sleeping. Someone must have taken her. My cries echoed through the house, echoing like truth. The officers barked orders, demanded I step back, but I knew they were watching every flicker of my expression, searching for guilt. And I gave them exactly what they expected to see: shock, disbelief, denial, the portrait of a man unraveling. But while they scoured my home, while they questioned me about phone calls and timelines, Jenny was waking up 30 feet below us. She came to slowly, groggy from the drug Tommy had slipped her, blinking into the soft light of the soundproof basement I had so carefully designed. The cream-painted walls, the small kitchenette, the comfortable bed, it looked almost welcoming, almost safe. Until her eyes found the reinforced steel door, until she realized there were no windows, no way out. Then the screen flickered to life. My face appeared before her, but not the broken, desperate mask I wore upstairs for the police. This was the real me, calm, composed, in control. Hello, darling, I said into the intercom, my voice smooth as glass. I trust you're feeling better. I imagine her blood ran cold when she heard me. She whispered my name at first, then screamed it, demanding to know what I had done. I let her rage, let her spit accusations of murder and madness. When she finally ran out of breath, I told her the truth, the kind of truth that slices deeper than lies. You wanted a new identity, I said. A fresh start. Consider this my gift to you. According to the world, Jenny Christian died in a car accident this afternoon. There's even a body to prove it. Well, close enough for the police. I heard the silence on the other end, the silence of a person realizing their perfect scheme had been flipped upside down. Jenny had wanted to disappear with my fortune and Wesley's arms around her. Instead, she had disappeared into my basement, forced to watch as I performed grief for a parade of friends and officers who believed she was gone forever. And oh, what a performance it was. When Wesley arrived, his face a mask of rehearsed sorrow, I welcomed him like a brother. He embraced me, whispered condolences, played the loyal friend, while my wife watched from her underground prison. She saw it all, the man she had risked everything for, pretending to console her grieving husband, all the while believing she was dead. She screamed at the monitor, begged me to stop, but I kept the volume off. Let her watch, let her see what loyalty truly looked like. The irony was exquisite. The same man who had stolen my wife's heart was now providing my alibi, vouching for my innocence, swearing to police he had spoken to me an hour before the crash. The world believed in my grief. They believed in Wesley's concern. They believed Jenny was gone. And still the trap tightened. Over the next days, the story grew. Neighbors arrived with flowers. Associates offered condolences. My daughter, safe at her friend's house, was told her mother had died suddenly, tragically. Jenny watched it all unfold on the monitors I provided her, each new visitor, another nail in the coffin of the life she had tried to build on betrayal. She saw her own funeral through a screen, her daughter crying over a casket that held nothing but air. I didn't need to lay a finger on her. The weight of her choices did the work for me. And as I stood in my living room listening to the murmurs of sympathy, I caught my reflection in the window. To them, I was a man destroyed by tragedy. To her, I was the executioner of her schemes. But to myself, I was something else entirely, a boy who had grown into a man who would never again be abandoned, never again be made a fool. She had thought betrayal would free her. Instead, it became her prison. And for the first time in years, I smiled, not the mask I wore for the world, but the smile of a man who knew that revenge had only just begun. 3 days after the accident, the house felt like a theater I controlled from behind the curtain. Upstairs, I played the grieving widower, flawlessly red eyes from carefully timed drops of glycerin, a trembling voice when neighbors brought casseroles, the slumped shoulders of a man hollowed out by loss. Downstairs, Jenny lived in silence and shock, watching her own death on the screen, forced to listen to the condolences that flowed like poisoned honey. I would speak to her sometimes through the intercom, my voice stripped of the trembling I offered to the world. You wanted to disappear, Jenny. You dreamed of a life without me, without responsibility, without the daughter you claimed to love. I've given you exactly that. You're gone. To everyone who matters, you don't exist anymore. Her sobs would echo against the steel walls, desperate, furious. She begged me to think of Casey, begged me to let her explain, but every word only deepened the satisfaction thrumming in my chest. Because for once, she was powerless and I was the one pulling the strings. Meanwhile, Wesley was unraveling. Jenny watched him through the monitor, saw the way he paced his apartment like a caged animal, checking his encrypted phone every few minutes for a message that would never come. He still believed she had escaped. He thought her silence was strategy, not captivity. But I could see the cracks forming. His hands shook. His voice faltered when he spoke of business. And when Ivan, the accountant who had helped them siphon my fortune, was confronted by federal agents I had staged, the dominoes began to fall faster than even I had anticipated. Jenny screamed at the screen when she realized what I was doing. "You're framing them! You're destroying lives!" I laughed low and cold. "I'm revealing who they really are. You all thought you were clever building a world behind my back. I'm just accelerating the inevitable collapse." The beauty of it was in the details. I had Ivan convinced he faced 20 years in prison unless he cooperated. Within hours, he was confessing everything, naming Wesley as the mastermind. Of course, the evidence I gave him to sign was carefully manufactured, but it didn't matter. Once the words were spoken, the machine of justice ground forward with no way to stop it. Jenny watched in horror as Wesley abandoned her even faster than I predicted. Instead of demanding answers, instead of searching for her, he called Tommy their fixer and begged for a new identity for himself. No mention of rescuing her, no plan to find the woman he claimed to love. He was ready to vanish alone to save his own skin while leaving her behind in the ashes. Her voice over the intercom was broken, strangled with grief. "My wife is dead," she whispered to herself as if admitting the truth for the first time. And I corrected her with the kind of precision only betrayal can carve into a man's heart. "No, Jenny Christian is dead. What you are now is something else entirely. The question is, do you even know who that is?" The days blurred, and with each one the empire they had tried to steal crumbled in their hands. Wesley was caught red-handed, transferring millions into hidden accounts. Ivan sang like a canary. The press devoured the scandal, business partner arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud. I made sure the story painted me as the betrayed husband who had lost everything: his wife, his partner, his peace, yet still stood strong for his daughter. Sympathy became my armor. Their shame became my crown. But Jenny, she was the final piece. Watching her daughter cry at the funeral nearly broke her. I could see it in her eyes on the monitor. She pressed her face to the screen, whispering, "Casey, baby, I'm here," over and over, though no one could hear her. And that was my masterpiece. She could see the child she'd abandoned, but she could never touch her again. One evening after the last mourner left and the cameras went dark, I leaned close to the intercom and gave her the choice that would define the rest of her life. You can vanish forever, live under a new name in some forgotten corner of the world, or you can try to come back and in doing so destroy your daughter's inheritance, her memories of you, her entire future. Decide carefully, because this is the only mercy you'll get from me." In the silence that followed, I could hear her sobbing. Not with anger this time, but with the heavy, choking grief of someone realizing the price of their own betrayal. And as I listened, I felt something I hadn't felt since the day my father walked out when I was 12. Not rage, not despair, not even satisfaction. Control. The one thing no one would ever take from me again. Jenny chose silence. I could see it in her eyes through the monitor, wild, broken, but resigned. She stopped screaming, stopped cursing me, stopped begging to be freed. Instead, she sat on the edge of the bed, in that soundproof room, staring into nothing, rocking slightly, as though trying to cradle the last fragments of the life she had destroyed with her own hands. For the first time since this began, I almost pitied her. Almost. Because I knew the truth. She was finally beginning to understand betrayal is not a moment, it's a slow poison. It eats the betrayer as surely as the betrayed. She had thought she could outsmart me, that she could vanish into a new life with Wesley's arms around her and my money in her pocket. But she had underestimated the one thing I had always carried like armor, my refusal to ever be left behind again. The world moved on. The story dominated headlines for weeks. Business partner arrested in fraud scheme. Widower speaks out after wife's tragic death. I gave interviews with carefully measured grief, painting myself as the broken husband clinging to his daughter for strength. People wept for me, praised me for my resilience, offered donations to a foundation I created in Jenny's name. Sympathy poured in like gold, and with it came power. Power she could only watch from the shadows. Wesley rotted in prison, abandoned by the very woman he thought he loved. Ivan, stripped of every deal, every penny, disappeared into witness protection. And Jenny. She lived in the basement, a ghost haunting her own life. Her daughter's face flickering on the monitor as the child she abandoned grew older without her. Every sob, every whispered apology, every moment of regret, I made sure she heard them echo back at her, a chorus of the consequences she had earned. Sometimes at night I would sit by the intercom listening to her ragged breathing and wonder if I had gone too far. If perhaps destroying her so completely had cost me a piece of myself too. But then I would remember the look on her face in those photographs with Wesley, that smile sharp and secretive. And I would remind myself that mercy was wasted on people who wield betrayal like a weapon. Still, there was one final act to play. Months later, when the world had settled into believing Jenny was gone, I staged the last move. I had Tommy, still on my payroll, arrange false documents, a ticket to a nameless place across the ocean. I told Jenny through the intercom that she was free to go. She stared at the door as it clicked open for the first time in months, her body trembling with disbelief. She stepped out gaunt, her hair tangled, her spirit fractured. I handed her the documents. This is who you are now. To the world, Jenny Christian is dead. If you love your daughter, you'll stay that way. If you ever come back, I'll destroy whatever fragile memory she still carries of you. Her lips quivered, but no words came. She took the papers, her hands shaking, and walked into the night like a ghost set loose. I never saw her again. But sometimes late at night I wonder where she is. If she built some small life under another name, if she thinks of me when the wind rattles the windows, if she sees our daughter's face in strangers on the street. And sometimes I even wonder if she hates me, or if deep down she finally understands that she created her own prison long before I locked the door. As for me, I rebuilt. I raised my daughter with all the strength I had left, shielding her from the shadows of her mother's betrayal. She grew up knowing her father as the man who survived heartbreak, who never gave up on her, who turned pain into armor. Maybe one day I'll tell her the truth. Or maybe some secrets are better left buried with the dead. And yet in the quiet hours I've learned something. Revenge is not fire. It is not fury. It is silence. It is the absence you leave in someone else's life, the void they cannot fill no matter how far they run. Jenny will live the rest of her life as no one, while I remain exactly who I always was, a man who refuses to be broken. If my story struck you, if you felt the weight of betrayal and the sharp edge of survival in these words, I hope you'll stay with me. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear that betrayal can be survived, and subscribe so we can keep exploring these stories together. And if you've ever faced betrayal, leave a comment. Your truth matters, your scars matter, and sometimes sharing them is the first step toward healing.